Here are our two warm-up problems for the day. Number one, we're determining end behavior. So remember, with end behavior, the first thing we have to do is find the highest exponent, no matter where it is in the problem. Our highest exponent is the 4, so we're only concerned about this term, none others. Well, we look at the fact that it's negative. Negative tells you that your right side is going down. Then I look at the exponent. Exponent is a 4. That's an even number. So that tells me whatever my right side does, my left side has to do the same. So they are both going down. So end behavior, right side down, left side's down as well. Second question says to write it in standard form and classify it by degree and number of terms. Well, standard form again depends on our highest exponent to start us. So our highest exponent here is the 3, which means this term has to come first. This term is a negative because of the minus sign, so we got to bring that with us. So negative 3x cubed. Then I look for my next exponent. Again, if you want, you could cross it out. Well, my next highest exponent is the 4x squared. So plus 4x squared. So now we've got the 4x squared written next. I'm going to cross it out. And all that's left is a 1, so that has to come last. So that's the standard form. That's not the only thing the question wanted. It said to classify it by degree and number of terms. Degree, again, we look at the exponent, which is a 3. Well, a degree of 3 we call a cubic. Then I look at the number of terms. I've got 1 term, 2 terms, 3 terms. Well, when we have 3 terms, we also call it a trinomial. So there are your 2 answers for today. Make sure you've corrected it and that you've been grading it this whole time. Here's your homework from last night. You should have been checking your answers in class as you did them. So some of them you should already know you have correct. Let me zoom in here. If you have questions or you need to talk about it with your classmates, you can always pause in order to get help from somebody. So here are your first 6. Scrolling it up. Here's your next 7 through 14. Again, pause as needed. These are all foiling for this section. 15, 16, 17, and 18 continue to be foiling. And then starting with 19, which we did do in class, we have the binomial times the trinomial, so they got a little bit longer. So here's through 23. Remember, everything in the first parenthesis has to get multiplied to everything in the second. Now, we've already added and subtracted polynomials, which meant we combined like terms. We multiplied, so we have our last operation to work with, which is dividing. There are several ways to divide polynomials. We're going to focus on synthetic division. So if they ask you to divide and they're polynomials, we're going to focus on this method no matter what else. To synthetically divide, the first thing you're going to do is you're going to write the coefficients, so the numbers attached. Of the polynomial in a horizontal line. You're going to be dividing by the opposite, so you might want to highlight that, underline it, of the constant from your divisor, and we'll clarify that when we get to the actual example. You're going to bring straight down the first coefficient. You won't do anything with it. and then you're going to multiply the coefficient by the divisor, which will be the number in the block, in the box. You then add down the column, and columns go straight down. Of the next coefficient, and you're going to continue multiplying and adding through the last coefficient. So it's multiply and add pretty much. Then you're going to add the variables back in. Using the numbers below the line. And you'll always start with the degree 1 less than the original problem. So if your original problem was an x cubed, then that means your answer will start with an x squared. So here's our first example. The first thing to look for is your divisor. The divisor is what you're dividing by, which is x plus 2. We're looking for the divisor, which will be the number, which is the positive 2, so we're only looking at this part. However, with synthetic division, we put it as the opposite. It's like it's in parentheses, and we always put that in as the opposite, because when we solve, it becomes the opposite. So in the box, we're going to put a negative 2. Now we're going to write down the coefficients of each term, making sure if there is a degree missing, if they do not go in order, that you fill in a 0 for it. And we'll see one like that. So we have an x cubed. It's by itself, so that means a 1. After an x cubed, you would expect to see an x squared. We have that. So we bring down the negative 14. After an x squared, we would expect to see just an x. So far, so good. So plus 51, so that's a positive 51. Well, the x doesn't have an exponent, which means the next thing we'd be looking for would be a number without a variable. We do, that's a negative 54. The first thing we do is we bring down our very first coefficient, so we bring it straight down. So that's a 1. And now we're going to be multiplying this number times this number. Well, 1 times negative 2 is negative 2. And now we add. Negative 14 plus negative 2 is negative 16. After we add, we multiply, so negative 16 times negative 2. So now we're back to a positive 32. 51 plus 32 adds up to 83. And again, it's multiply, add, multiply, add. We just added, so now we go back to multiplying. 83 times negative 2 is a negative 166. We add for the last time because we're on the last column, and that gives me a negative 220. It is okay for that number to be a large number. So now we add the variables back in. So we started with an x cubed, and remember we always start 1 less than that. So that would mean an x squared. So 1x squared. Then we have a negative 16 with just an x. And then we have an 83. Well, after just an x would be just a number. Now here, the negative 220, that's our remainder, which we have a space for it. So our remainder is negative 220. A lot of times, because it's a remainder, you write it over what you divided by. So you'll also see, when you do your homework, you'll see minus 220 for the remainder over what you divided by, which is x plus 2. So since there was a space, we could put the remainder there, but really and truly, this is what we want to see. Now, we're going to start the try, and then you're going to finish it on your own. The reason that I want to start it is look at your exponents. We start with an exponent of 3, which means we should see an exponent of 2, then an x, and then just a number. So if you look here, we're missing an x squared. So we need to fill in a 0 in its place for a placeholder. So we're going to do that, and then you're going to try this problem on your own. So our divisor is the opposite of this number. So that's a -7, so we're going to put in a 7. And then 1 for the x cubed. We're missing that x squared, so that's where the 0 goes. Then we have our x, and then we have 56. Go ahead and finish the problem best you can for the first time, and then we'll go over it and see how you did. So unpause when you're ready to move on. The first thing we do is we bring down the first number, so you should have brought your 1 down. And then you start multiplying and adding. So 1 times 7 is 7. Then you should have added. 0 plus 7 is 7. Now we multiply. 7 times 7 is 49. Now we add. 49 times plus -57 takes us to a -8. We added, so now we multiply. -8 times 7 is a -56, and our remainder is 0. What that tells me is x minus 7 is what we would call a factor because it divides into it evenly since there was no remainder. So remember, when you were writing these, you start with one exponent less. So we have 1x squared, or just preferably x squared, plus 7x minus 8. You could put the remainder of 0, but we technically don't even write it. We just leave this as our answer. And again, the better answer would just be x squared plus 7x minus 8. We'll finish the rest of these notes tomorrow, so your homework is just on practicing the synthetic division. And again, any remainders, make sure you put them over the fraction.